Disclaimer, everything said in this episode is fake. The government always wants what is best for you, and the mainstream media never lies. The vaccines are the greatest thing that happened to mankind, and boosters are the answer to any problem. Thank you for watching and for being a good, compliant citizen.
Are you a law-abiding citizen? Have you taken all of your booster jabs? Have you pledged allegiance to the State of Israel and donated half of your yearly income to AIPAC and aided in the bombing of children overseas? Have you blindly followed whatever the mainstream media tells you and haven't questioned it in any way, shape, or form? Perfect. You're forever going to be in the good graces of the global powers. But if you oppose any of that or criticize it in any way, shape, or form, I have bad news for you. You're going to lose your job, you're going to be labeled as an extremist, and you're probably going to jail. Welcome to the free world. We have a lot to talk about today, including the arrest of Telegram's founder and what it means for free speech, Mark Zuckerberg's love letter and the next pandemic, and the price you pay for criticizing the world's most moral country. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Welcome back to Finding Freedom, the show that empowers you to become the freest version of yourself, one critical question at a time. Let's start with the arrest of the founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, a man whose commitment to privacy and free speech has quite simply made him a target. On one side, you've got the mainstream allegations. French authorities claim they arrested Durov because Telegram is allegedly being used to facilitate serious crimes like drug trafficking, money laundering, and the distribution of child sexual abuse materials. They also accuse Telegram of failing to adequately moderate content and cooperate with law enforcement. Let's not forget, they're also raising concerns about encryption, claiming Durov provided cryptology services without proper licensing. This all ties into a broader investigation with 12 criminal allegations, mostly centered around complicity in various offenses. But then there's the counter-narrative, a perspective that sees Durov's arrest as something far more troubling. Some view this as a targeted attack on platforms that dare to prioritize user privacy and resist government censorship. This narrative suggests that Durov's arrest sets a dangerous precedent. If platform owners can be held responsible for user-generated content, the fear is that we're looking at a future where innovation is stifled and free speech is suppressed. Tech industry figures are concerned that this could have a chilling effect, making tech founders fear travel to certain countries for fear of arrest over crimes they didn't even commit, but their users did. And let's consider why Telegram is being singled out. Other platforms also host problematic content, yet they seem to be flying under the radar without any problems. This selective enforcement raises questions. Could there be political motivations at play? Given Durov's history of resisting Russian government pressure, some speculate that there could be broader geopolitical factors influencing this case. While Durov faces the wrath of those in power, let's not forget about Meta. This platform has been accused of allegedly facilitating terrorist communications and providing a haven for child predators. Yet Mark Zuckerberg remains untouched. Why? Because Zuckerberg plays within the rules. But that might change because he just admitted in a letter to Congress that Meta was coerced by the U.S. government into censoring information about the pandemic and the 2020 election. And I'd actually like to read a portion of that letter to you right here. In 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down. And we own our decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it, else we wouldn't make today. Like I said to our teams at the time, I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards to pressure from any administration in either direction, and we're ready to push back if something like this happens again. Remember all the times they were talking about misinformation, and we want to mitigate the spread of misinformation. And it turns out that they themselves are spreading that misinformation and lying by omission and coercing tech companies into emitting and censoring information, whether it was Google or YouTube, who's owned by Google, or whether it's Twitter and the Twitter files, and you can go search that yourself. And of course, so many YouTube videos, including probably this one and previous ones on my channel, that had that infamous bar, the COVID-19 Information Center. We don't want you to have any misinformation. Absolutely incredible. The government, it seems, wasn't just spreading misinformation, they were manufacturing it. And Zuckerberg, instead of facing any consequences, continues to walk free. For now. Meanwhile, Durov gets the full force of the law for daring to protect your right to speak freely. Welcome to the world of free speech. And speaking about selective justice, let's talk about Andrew Tate for a moment and his brother Tristan. Now, I don't know them personally, and I have no evidence that they're innocent. But at the same time, I have zero evidence that they're guilty. We always used to hear the phrase innocent until proven guilty, but apparently it doesn't apply if you speak a little too much truth and expose corruption. If there's undeniable proof that they're guilty, I'd be the first to call it out, because I don't put anyone on a pedestal and no man is perfect. But at the same time, it's a little too convenient that they became targets of global institutions simultaneously, just as they became extremely famous and were speaking truth to power. The Tates have been vocal critics of global corruption, the fiat currency scam, the pandemic manipulation, and the damage that the jabs caused. And yes, even Israel's war crimes. And what do they get for their trouble? A one-way ticket through the legal system, with charges that seem to materialize out of thin air. It's called Lawfare, the strategic use of legal systems to crush and silence any opposition. The Tates aren't alone in this. Remember Aaron Swartz, the co-founder of Reddit? He tried to make academic knowledge free for all. He faced 35 years in prison and $1 million fine, all for liberating information. The pressure drove him to take his own life, and yet we're supposed to believe that these cases are just about enforcing the law? Please. What about Russell Brand, known for his sharp wit and biting critique of the establishment? Brand has never shied away from calling out hypocrisy, corruption, and the media's role in shaping public perception. He's questioned everything from corporate power to governmental overreach, making him a thorn in the side of those who prefer the status quo. So when allegations of sexual misconduct surfaced out of nowhere, many were quick to point out the timing, just as his voice was gaining more traction than ever before, and his critiques were becoming harder to ignore. While it's crucial to take any accusation seriously, it's also important to recognize the pattern. Brand's outspoken nature and refusal to play by the rules have made him a target, and these allegations conveniently serve to discredit and silence him. Then, of course, there's Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Assange exposed some of the most significant government secrets of our time: war crimes, diplomatic cables, and the inner workings of powerful institutions. His work brought transparency to a world covered in secrecy, but it also made him a target, of course. The sexual misconduct charges against Assange in Sweden, which eventually led to his years of confinement in the Ecuadorian embassy and subsequent arrest, all for the crime of revealing the truth. It seems increasingly evident that there's a trend here, a coordinated effort to silence vocal proponents of free speech by drowning them in criminal lawsuits. Whether it's Durov, Tate, or any other figure challenging the status quo, the playbook appears consistent. Smear them, drag them through the courts, make them pay for daring to speak out. It's a dangerous path that we're on, and it's one we need to confront immediately. This is a very dangerous precedent to set, not only because it decimates people's desires to speak openly and truthfully, but because it now makes us live in a world where we truly don't even know who or what to believe anymore. If someone who's an actual criminal, who's committed heinous and repulsive crimes, is arrested and charged, our initial instinct might be to not believe the charges raised against him. Our first impression might be skepticism and even an attempt to defend him because of all of the previous false allegations that came before him. This has to change. Now, let's shift gears to the intimate relationship between big tech and big government and how that relationship was exploited and exposed during the pandemic. Remember that monkeypox outbreak just a couple of years ago? Oh, actually, it's been rebranded as Mpox. The World Health Organization declared an international public health emergency. And boom, it's 2020 all over again. Like a beautiful dream that keeps on recurring. There's so much to look forward to again, like PCR tests, masks, lockdowns, experimental jabs, mandates, and the government's favorite weapon of choice, fear. It's as if the playbook never changed, but why should it? It worked so incredibly well the first time. But thankfully, I'm lucky. Actually, I'm blessed to have something that's going to protect me from the COVID and Mpox demons combined. It's the mother of all treasures, the holy grail of all prized possessions. Are you ready for it? Check this out. It is the Pandemic Preparedness Protocol, the PPP. It has everything you could possibly dream of. Check this out here. Hand sanitizer, PCR tests that may or may not work, that may produce false positives or false negatives depending on the date, a week's supply of masks. It's so beautiful. Oh, and you're probably wondering what these are. Social distancing measures, of course. So check this out. I have 6 feet from the front. Okay, just like that. I'm fully protected from the front right now. And boom, 6 feet from the back. That's 12 feet. Double the protection. It's perfect. Oh, what is this? Looks like it came straight out of Wuhan. That's perfect. You can get your PPP in the link in the description for a low price of your freedom, your will, and your dignity. Now stay safe and continue to listen to instructions from the government, who will continue to follow the science, and always have your best interest at heart. Mark Zuckerberg's letter to Congress wasn't just a confession, it was a peek into the machinery of psychological manipulation. The U.S. government didn't just ask for censorship, they demanded it. And platforms like Meta complied, happily censoring dissenting voices while propagating the very misinformation they claimed to fight. Zuckerberg's sudden transparency raises more questions than answers. Why now? Is he trying to get ahead of a whistleblower, or is he just such a beautiful, noble human being? Could it be that he knows something big is coming? Something that might finally expose the extent of the government's coercion? It's not out of the realm of possibility. And while Zuckerberg remains free, we have to wonder how long before charges suddenly appear against him out of thin air, just like they did with Pavel Durov. I think it's only a matter of time. And now, let's talk about Israel, who owns the so-called most moral army in the world. Yes, the one that sends a warning bomb before flattening entire neighborhoods, carpet bombing them as if that makes everything okay. This is the same army whose soldiers post selfies wearing the woman they've murdered, playing with the toys of the children they've massacred. The same army that prisoners in the West Bank, throws families out of their homes, and protects armed settlers as they terrorize, harass, and kill innocent Palestinians. But don't worry, Israel can do no wrong, at least not in the eyes of the U.S. Why? Because Israel has a stranglehold on American politics that would make even the most seasoned mob boss look like a saint. Candace Owens, Dan Bilzerian, Bassem Youssef, Dave Smith. These are some of the many celebrities to call out Israel's dark history and the obscene influence it has over U.S. foreign policy. Candace Owens has been vocal about the double standards, the way Israel can get away with actions that would have any other country labeled a rogue state. But instead of being commended for her honesty, she's being attacked from all sides. Owens isn't just fighting the Israeli lobby, she's fighting the very system that protects it. And then there's Dan Bilzerian, who seemingly came out of the blue, criticizing the peculiar relationship between the U.S. and Israel. He's recently been digging into Israel's influence on American politics. He talked about things such as the USS Liberty incident, where Israeli forces attacked an American naval ship in 1967, killing 34 U.S. servicemen. It was a brutal, unprovoked assault, and Israel got away with it. The U.S. government swept it under the rug, calling it an accident. An accident? For sure it was. It was a message that Israel can do whatever it wants, and the U.S. will turn a blind eye. Bilzerian also brought up the Dancing Israelis, a group of men who were seen celebrating as the Twin Towers collapsed on 9/11. They were later identified as Israeli nationals working for Israeli intelligence, and the whole incident was quietly buried. Why? Because questioning Israel is off limits. It's almost as if Israel has something on the U.S., something so damning that even high-level officials are terrified to speak out. Could it be that Israeli intelligence has dirt on U.S. officials and is holding them hostage? Kind of like the IDF is holding over 12,000 Palestinian prisoners hostage in the West Bank without charge, torturing them daily? If they can do that to civilians, imagine what they could do to a politician with secrets to hide. Now, Bassem Youssef, the Jon Stewart of the Arab world, moved to the U.S. seeking freedom, only to find out that the land of the free isn't so free at all. He's recently been outspoken about Israel's crimes against humanity and the constant oppression of Palestinians. And for his honesty, he's been blacklisted in Hollywood, lost out on major deals, and faced serious threats to his life and the life of his family members, which recently made him temporarily deactivate his Twitter account. Bassem's vocal criticism is a reminder that the U.S. is not immune to the very corruption it claims to fight. The truth is, Israel's influence on American politics is so pervasive, so deeply ingrained, that it's hard to see where American policy ends and where Israeli interests begin. AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, wields more power in Washington than any other lobby, funneling millions into political campaigns to ensure that both parties stay in line. This isn't diplomacy, this is extortion. Israel dictates U.S. policy, and in return, they get billions in aid, military support, and a free pass to commit atrocities that would have any other nation sanctioned into the next dimension. Now let's talk about Zionism. Zionism, according to Israelis, at its core is a political ideology that originally sought to establish a homeland for the Jewish people in the land of Palestine. The movement began in the 19th century, driven by a desire to create a safe haven for Jews who had faced centuries of persecution in Europe and elsewhere. At least that's what they claim. That's the historical backdrop according to them. But like many ideologies, Zionism has changed into something much more concerning, to say the least. Today, Zionism has come to mean something far more disturbing and for many, even deeply troubling. In its current form, as it stands today, Zionism often involves the belief that Jews have an exclusive right to the land of Palestine, even if that means displacing, oppressing, and ethnically cleansing the indigenous people of Palestine. This modern interpretation of Zionism goes beyond simply wanting a homeland. It's about maintaining and expanding control over the land by any means necessary. And let's be honest, this isn't just about the land, it's about power. It's about a belief system that in its most extreme forms suggests that Jews are the superior race and that everyone else, particularly the Palestinians, are inferior. This supremacist ideology has fueled policies and actions that by any objective standard amount to apartheid and ethnic cleansing. We see this in the way Palestinian homes are bulldozed to make way for illegal Israeli settlements. We see it in the way entire communities are uprooted, families torn apart, and lives destroyed, all to make room for those who are deemed more deserving of the land. And we see it in the violent suppression of any resistance to these actions, whether it's through military force, imprisonment, or the silencing of dissenting voices. Now let's be clear, this isn't about all Jews. There are plenty of Jews around the world who oppose these actions and who stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and with human rights. But the version of Zionism that dominates Israeli policy, the likes of which Ben Shapiro believes in, is one that prioritizes land and power over human rights and justice. This ideology has led to the systemic dehumanization of Palestinians, who are often portrayed as less than human, as obstacles to be removed, rather than as people with their own rights, histories, and connections to that land. It is an extremely dangerous mindset, and it justifies all manner of atrocities, from bombings that kill entire families to the daily harassment and abuse of Palestinians by Israeli settlers and soldiers. And it's all done under the guise of security, survival, and maintaining a Jewish state. But let's call it what it is: a brutal, ongoing campaign to erase an entire people from their homeland. This is the reality that many vocal critics of Israel, like Candace Owens, Dan Bilzerian, Bassem Youssef, and many other honorable celebrities, have been trying to bring to light. They've been willing to speak out against the injustices they see, despite knowing the backlash and the real-life repercussions they're going to face. Because, let's be honest, they're not getting any incentives. Actually, it's the exact opposite. Their lives are at stake, their freedom, their platforms, their livelihoods. They have everything to lose and virtually nothing to gain. And what's the response? They're labeled as anti-Semitic, traitors, as people who hate Jews, but that couldn't be further from the truth. And until we're willing to confront that reality for what it is, to speak out against the injustices being committed in the name of Zionism, there will be no peace, no justice, and no end to the suffering of the Palestinian people. So let's pose the question: could it be that Israeli intelligence is holding American politicians hostage with incriminating evidence, just like the IDF holds Palestinian prisoners without charge? When Israel can do no wrong, when its crimes are excused, and its critics are silenced, you have to wonder, who's really running the show here? And more importantly, why are they being allowed to get away with it? The landscape is changing, and more voices are coming out every single day. But as we've seen, these voices come at a cost, and it's up to us to keep the conversation going, to question the narratives, and to demand accountability. And above all else, we can't ever fear speaking the truth, because even if the cost of freedom is high, the cost of silence and complicity and contributing towards evil and the degradation of humanity is infinitely higher. Thank you for tuning in. This might be the very last episode of Finding Freedom, because they're probably coming to get me. Stay curious, stay critical, and most importantly, stay free.